Welcome to Age, Pension, Super and Retirement. I am your host Yvonne, and as always, this is information only and not personal advice. Today, continuing on with our series on aged care, we will be looking at permanent care, and we'll be welcoming back Gayle McHugh, who is the Director of Prosperity Planning Partners and is helping us unpack lots of topics in this complicated aged care series. Welcome back, Gayle.
Thanks for having me again.
Let's get into it, Gayle. Permanent care, if that is decided to be the best option, the option that we're going to go down with our loved one, just generally, how does this all work?
There's no simple answer to that one because firstly, it depends on whether you're a member of a couple or you're a single person, because fees for a couple are slightly different because the family home is an exempt asset when somebody is still living there. So let's say husband is going to care, wife is living in the family home, and Centrelink, when I say they don't care whether your home is a $50,000 caravan or a $5 million home. That home in which you live is an exempt asset, providing your spouse stays in it if you are a member of a couple. So that firstly gets exempted from any of the asset test fees that we're talking about that might be happening when you move to aged care. But let's go back a step. You can only get into residential aged care on a permanent basis if you have had an ACAT assessment, an aged care assessment team visit, where they have decided that the person who's going to care is actually in need of permanent residential care. Without that, you can't get a place in a government-funded facility. However, I am going to state to you, I live on the Gold Coast and there is an amazing facility here that is not government funded. They just have a set fee per day and they will take the person without an ACAT assessment. We're starting to see the introduction of non-government funded places.
That is really interesting, Gayle. Thank you. We've mentioned this acronym before, but if we could again just explain what is a RAD, and I'm actually curious, how much do they range from?
Well, that's a $1 million question, and I use that number quite literally. What's known as the RAD, which is a refundable accommodation deposit. Some facilities, depending upon where they are, if they're rural based, may have a lesser RAD than something, for example, in the middle of Sydney with beautiful views down the harbour. I know that this to be true because I'm aware of one RAD that's been paid for a very small room in a facility that's got harbour views in Sydney, and it was an older RAD and it was $1.2 million. So this was a while back, but current RADs are increasing. This is because from the 1st of January 2025, the government actually gave all facilities the capacity to increase their minimum RAD amount, and RAD stands for Refundable Accommodation Deposit. They gave them that opportunity to increase those RADs because effectively most homes, if you think about it, are no longer worth $500,000. I live on the Gold Coast. The average house price is around $1.3 million. So if somebody's living on the Gold Coast, their house could be anywhere from, say, an $800,000 or $900,000 unit right through to a $20 million waterfront mansion. So as a result of the constant increase in housing values, the government has gone, well, hang on, if somebody's moving to aged care, we need to increase the minimum RADs. And the minimum RADs, when I started doing this way back in about 2008, were around $300,000. We're now seeing minimum RADs at $750,000. Under the current system, we're talking now in August 2025, so prior to the 1st of November 2025, if your loved one moves to care, there is nothing held back from the refundable accommodation deposit unless you want the aged care facility to take some fees from it. From the 1st of November 2025, there's going to be a 2% annual amount that can be withheld by the aged care facility, and that's actually to help assist with cost of care from your RAD amount. So if you have a $750,000 RAD, they can hold back $15,000 a year, and at this point, most facilities are planning on deducting this $15,000 on a monthly basis. So that would be $1,250 a month would be taken from your RAD amount. But if you only pay $100,000 towards the $750,000 RAD amount, they can only take 2% of the $100,000 per year. But I say but because if you don't pay the full RAD amount, you're going to be paying a daily accommodation payment. And that's currently around 7.81% that they will charge you on any unpaid RAD amount. Oh, and I forgot to say that withheld amount, that 2%, is to be charged for no more than 5 years. So effectively, if you put $750,000 into a RAD and your loved one lived in aged care for more than 5 years, the maximum deductible amount from that would be $15,000 times 5, which is $75,000.
Now, I'm going to see if I've got this. So currently, you do get the refundable accommodation deposit back. So nothing is withheld. And that's grandfathered, is it, Gayle, till the 1st of...
No, it's grandfathered based on the fact that if you've gone into care prior to the 1st of November 2025, you've gone in on the current set of rules. If you enter aged care post 1st of November 2025, then that 2% withholding will apply.
Thank you so much for clearing that up. Now, when you mentioned $100,000, are you suggesting that sometimes people pay a part of the RAD?
Absolutely. And this is for multiple reasons. Sometimes people are cash flow rich, as in lots of money coming in, but no savings. I don't know whether you're aware, but in the old days, and I mean the old days, when pensions and superannuation accounts were defined benefit schemes, they were designed to have an income stream for life, and that was guaranteed by the government, but there was no capital value. So for some people, they have a really big income stream, but no access to capital. When I say capital, there's no conversion amount behind that income stream, and therefore they can't take money out of the income stream to pay for their aged care fees. But they might have, say, $200,000 between husband and wife that is available for them to put towards cost of aged care. And they might decide, well, I'm going to put $100,000 towards the refundable accommodation deposit. So they will pay a partial RAD and then they will pay a daily accommodation payment, which is based on the difference between the amount that they have paid and the actual RAD for the bed. And it's calculated on a daily basis using, it's called the maximum permissible interest charge, MPI. And I have seen that at well over 11%. It's currently 7.81 in August 2025.
Thank you, Gayle, for breaking that down. So there is a formula for the daily accommodation payment. Thanks for explaining that. So effectively, there's a cap on that payment, or is it just that percentage?
No, there is no cap at all. So effectively, there's not a cap on how much you can end up paying for as a DAP, which is a daily accommodation payment, because it relates to the size of your RAD that you agreed to pay. Now, I suggested earlier that $750,000 is starting to become the minimum. There are other rooms that are out there that are going to be $1 million and more, and the maximum permissible interest charge depends on what it was when you went into care. So effectively, it doesn't just go down or up, it's part of your contract, which is when I said it was 11% earlier, that was what my mother-in-law paid, and I've seen it lower than it is now, but I've also seen it way higher than it is now because it's linked to official cash rates. And effectively what you're doing is when you're being charged this daily accommodation payment, you've almost got to consider it as if you're paying interest on the outstanding amount at whatever the interest rate is that's on your contract, and that is effectively at an unsecured borrowing rate. It's not like you can take a loan against your house and not get it at say 4.5% to 5%, maybe even 5.5%, depending upon your loan to valuation ratio. But because you're talking about an amount that the government and the provider have decided is the right amount for that particular room that your loved one is living in, if you don't have that amount to pay, they're going to charge you as if you have an unsecured debt with them, hence the much higher interest rate. And it never comes back. That daily accommodation and payment amount never comes back to the family.
So that seems like a key difference and really important to be aware of.
Oh, it's hugely different to most people's expectations, because I've heard people say, oh, look, I don't want to give them my money. I'll just pay the ongoing daily accommodation payment. Now, if mum and dad have got money in a term deposit and it's earning, let's say 5%, and you're paying 7.81, let's call it 8% for my simple math, if it's $100,000 that's sitting in their bank account, that difference between 5% and 8% is going to be 3%. So you're going to effectively pay $3,000 more per $100,000 that's outstanding versus what's sitting in mum or dad's bank account. The only time I say to somebody, don't pay the RAD in full if you can afford it, is if somebody's got a really short life expectancy.
That's such an interesting point to be aware of. And just touching on a previous topic where we talked about respite, I can really see from a financial planner's point of view how it helps to give time when coming up with this RAD.
Oh, 100%. While you're on residential respite care, they cannot charge you a RAD or the daily accommodation payment amount. So that gives us potentially a few weeks, sometimes a little bit more, depending upon the facility, of not having to find huge amounts to pay for cost of care. Now, I'm going to just quickly work out. So if you have a RAD of $750,000 and you have not paid a cent towards it, the total interest costs would be around $58,575 per annum. That amount would never come back to the family. But if we divide that by the number of days in a year, we're talking basically $161 that you would save in a DAP, a daily accommodation payment, if you use respite before you agree to go permanently into care. There's a reason for that, because if somebody's got to sell a house as, say, a single person, or they've got to release some equity from their home if that's what they decide to do, or they've got to sell some shares, these things take time. And we need to basically buy some time by using a respite care versus going permanently to aged care.
That is so fascinating to unpack, and I guess it sounds to me so complicated, especially perhaps if we're talking about a couple. And you just mentioned selling a family home. This sounds huge and something that financial advice would be vital for.
Once I was doing a presentation at Carers Queensland, and one lovely lady said to me, oh, Gayle, I've got to sell my family home because my husband's got to go to care. And I said to her, hang on, why do you think you have to sell your family home? She said, well, the aged care facility said they want $330,000. We've got $10,000 in the bank. I am going to have to sell our house for him to go to care, and then I'll have to rent for the rest of my life. And this is harking back to my comment about husband and wife living, one in care, one at home. And I said to her, no, please don't sell, because you just have to tell the aged care facility that you are not in a position to pay the RAD amount, explain to them what your overall asset position is, and they will issue you a contract based on your asset position. Now, that's a really important thing for people to know, because quite often aged care facility front-end staff will be expecting you to pay a RAD, and you may not have the assets to allow you to pay a RAD, but they will say, I have a bed available to you, Gayle. I've got a bed. It's worth $750,000. We want you to pay the RAD. They won't tell you that, but their expectation is you will be paying a RAD. Unfortunately, not everyone's in a position to pay a RAD. So there are actually 3 levels of support that the government provides depending upon your asset position. So if, as a single person, you have less than $61,500, and now this is correct as at the 19th of August 2025, you don't have to pay an accommodation payment at all. You basically only pay the daily care fee. And that, to me, makes a lot of sense, because if people don't have assets, you can't get blood out of a stone. Then there's another level of contract which is partially supported, and that's for people who have assets of $61,500 up to, this is a magic number today, $206,663.20. And I'm only telling you that because I'm reading it, because I can never remember the specific amount because it's indexed. That can be partially supported, so that you would pay an accommodation contribution. So you can pay a daily accommodation payment, which we've just spoken about. If you have assets of in excess of that magic 206,663.20, as at the 19th of August 2025, you will be expected to pay a full accommodation payment. So that would be either a RAD, the refundable accommodation deposit, or a DAP, which is a daily accommodation payment. So that's something for each person to consider. So if you're single, that applies. But if you're a member of a couple, those same limits still apply. So a couple could have potentially $300,000 worth of asset, and the person entering care would be considered to be partially supported because they would have roughly $150,000 worth of assets per person. And they wouldn't be required to pay a RAD. They would just be required to pay a daily accommodation payment or a contribution towards their cost of care.
That was amazing, Gayle. You have just touched on, and with your story have brought this topic to life. Remember that this is information only and never personal advice. Before we go on to our last question, Gayle, how could you be reached?
Gayle is my name, and it's spelt weirdly. It's Gayle at prosperityplanning.com.au. So Gayle at prosperityplanning.com.au. You'll then pop in my inbox and I will contact you, or you can call me on 0407 159 298.
Thank you so much, Gayle. Gayle, if someone has a home care package, does this transfer to respite or aged care when it's permanent?
Not really. You can sometimes, depending upon your package provider and how much you've got left in your home care package, you can sometimes ask for that provider to pay for respite care, but it doesn't transfer to aged care, because once you become a resident of the aged care facility, a permanent resident, then the home care package no longer applies. You're treated very differently and you're assessed under whatever the aged care fees are at the time you move to care.
Thank you so much, Gayle. For our international listeners who would like to join the Age Pension, Super and Retirement Facebook group, the code word is RED. As always, this is never personal advice and information only. Thank you so very much, Gayle.
You're more than welcome.